and welcome to the Game Design Variety Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Dunstan. Thank you very much for dropping by on this lovely Monday evening / afternoon / morning / Tuesday very early morning, depending on where you are in the world. Hey, Bram, how are you going? And yes, thank you very much. I will be getting onto it in later, in news, I guess, or very shortly. But yeah, the good news is that I am now an affiliate or Twitch affiliate. I don't know what the technical term for it is. So yeah, well, firstly, thank you all for your support and your watching up to this point, which has kind of got me there. Hey, Alex, how you going? Hey. Yeah, so I'm also getting used to it. Lost my train of thought. There are like channel point things, and I've tried to come up with some sort of interesting ways to use the channel points, which I think I inventively have called game components, because all designers need a whole bunch of game components to do what they need to do. Maybe if I can figure out how to actually make icons, I will have some little cubes there, or meeples, or something like that. Yeah, so there's the normal kind of remind me to drink kind of things, but yeah, there's a bunch that are maybe some interesting things that, whether it's you ask me a question about anything. I mean, sort of game design stuff is free. Just put stuff in the chat anytime. But if you're ever interested just to ask me anything, even outside of game design, there's that. There's mini reviews. If you shout me a board game title, I can give you my thoughts in a minute or so. And then going on to like sharing game ideas, which I always wanted to make. I'm definitely of the opinion that it's worthwhile just sharing any ideas you have if possible. So I can share some via stream, and people are welcome to go off and make their own games, and then all the way up to maybe like a sort of a game jam around a certain topic or working with things. Let me know if you think what I've got there at the moment is interesting or fun, or if you've got ideas about what you'd like to be there. I'm certainly up for suggestions. So yeah, do let me know. How are you all going? How's your weekend been? My weekend, I've got like the question prepped, but I've completely blocked in terms of thinking how I'd actually answer my own question. Fairly quiet weekend, as is usual. So did get to play. The fun part of the weekend for me is always getting to play some longer games. Hey Nicholas, how you going? Welcome. And I got to play Orleans actually this weekend with the expansion, with the merchants. What's it called? Like it's like Merchants and Intrigue expansion, I think. Hey Jay, how you going? Yeah, so, and that was a lot of fun. I think it's the 5th time we've played this year, so I'm always usually playing with my partner. And I won by 3 points, which I think is probably the closest game we've ever had. Like 166 to 163 or something. Not that I'm counting, even though I made consecutive errors in my scoring near the end, which meant my total kept sort of dropping slowly as we kept recounting. But I got there in the end and won by 3 points. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it reminds me of actually I really do enjoy Orleans actually quite a bit. And fun fact, it was it was also nominated for the Kennerspiel same year that Elysium was one of my games. So I got to meet Rainer at the at the award ceremony, and he was very good company. Yeah, so and although of course we both lost to room service in the end. But yeah, so that was fun. A few other small games. Kept playing Glasgow actually. Had a really nice tight play of that. And yeah, just working on various design related things. The Hitman game, which has featured on the stream previously. I think we played it live probably like a couple weeks ago now. It has progressed. I've got rid of most of the bugs, and maybe we'll play it again on stream. I'm not sure. It hasn't changed that much, but it's more from the programming side. So there's less times where you wander into the room with a guard, and the guard has no idea where you are, who you are or what you're doing there. So yeah, that was quite good, and yeah, worked on a few other small projects. Another cool thing that happened this weekend is I picked up a parcel, and my designer copies of the latest English release in the adventure game series. So the Volcanic Island is the third title in the series. Is now available in English in all good English places. So they sent me my designer copies. Sort of funny fact about these is originally, because Cosmos is a German company, they would send me 10 German copies and then 2 copies of each of the other languages. And this is the first time I managed to tell them, could I have 10 English copies and maybe only 2 German copies? I used to have to sort of be giving away the German copies en masse to like literally anybody I knew who spoke German, because they're hugely language dependent, which is quite funny. But I now have 10 English copies of Volcanic Island, so that's really cool. Cool package to get. First games I've actually received in Prague as well, which is a nice little thing maybe. Hey Mandel, how you going? You maybe missed my point. We played Glasgow this morning. I lost by 2 points, 40 to 38. It was an extremely close match. But yeah, good fun. Yeah, so it's always nice to have, you know, copies turn up, and it's actually nice to be able to share it with people, I guess. You know, if this is not the time to celebrate, then why not? Yeah, so and interesting enough, this is one of the first ones which wasn't completely written by Phil and I. So yeah, it was mostly written actually by Michael at Cosmos, who's still like the main person helping us with the games, and we're working together on the new project. So yeah, and the other kind of cool thing about this is 4 parts instead of normal 3. So most of the games only have 3 parts. This has 4 parts, massive branching storyline. So it's actually a bit more complex, I'd say, a bit more for gamers. So if you're looking for a bit more of a crunchier kind of adventure game, you know, with actually quite a bit more replayability, there are huge parts of the game that you won't see depending on what choices you make earlier on in the game. Volcanic Island could be one for you. So yeah, but it's nice to have copies, and I'm looking forward to playing with some people probably over the break. Although not that I am actually going to be seeing anybody, as I'm sure a lot of us are. So, but maybe I'll say that for 2021. Yeah, no, definitely really enjoying it. Yeah, definitely, Mandela. Thanks. Yeah, so what is on for today? Today there'll be a bit of news. The main topic is contracts, talking about contracts. So I in fact did sign a contract for one of my games today, sent it back off to the publisher. We had as I said on Friday, had a discussion. They sent the contract to me over the weekend. And I was looking through my normal sort of checklist for contracts, and then I thought, well, while I'm doing that, it might be, it'd be a great topic to talk about on the stream. So yeah, I'll be going through contracts, different things to look out for, things to consider, some of my own experiences, as much as I can say. So that's sort of the main part. There's like 1 or 2 links of sort of other game design sort of stuff that I found in my times that maybe you'll be interested, maybe you won't be. So we'll have a look at that, and then just normal chill chat about design as is interested. So yeah, hopefully grab a nice cup of tea, beverage, whatever you feel like. Sit back in a comfortable chair and yeah, enjoy the variety hour, which as the viewers have pointed out is becoming less and less like an actual hour the more I get into this. But yeah, anyway, I'll keep going as long as it's fun. I've got my normal Earl Grey tea. Which is still a bit hot, but it usually, I've got to have some while it's hot. I normally sort of forget about it, and then I'm in the late part of the stream, and then it's very cold. But anyway, yeah, thanks, Mandela. Yeah, it's going well. So what's up first? Well, I guess the first thing is sort of the channel news, and those who were here earlier have already seen this. I'm now an affiliate on Twitch, and that is in large part to all of you. Thank you very much for your support over the past month and a half. Ish or whatever. I think it's about 6 weeks I've been going. Yeah, I was holding on to that 49 followers for a really long time, and then I ticked over. I should look at who no, I don't think it was most of you. Yeah, it was star player Robert. Robert pushed me over into the 50, which was the last thing I needed. So thanks very much, Robert, if you're watching. Yeah, and in terms of changes, I'm still working out how ads work on Twitch. I guess some of you may have had to watch an ad getting into the stream. I don't know if I can actually disable that. I have tried to disable any ads during the stream. let me know if the ads are really annoying. I can look more into it. I mean, I'm not doing this to make money, so I'm quite happy to kind of disable ads as much as possible. There's a possibility to subscribe, but once again, it's really, I would just much prefer that you just hang out. Again, it's money. It's not really the reason I'm doing this. And I know I probably need to look into it a little bit more, but before I sort of talk about it anyway. There are Twitch subscriptions, which that's kind of a free way to support. Not Twitch, Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, you get a free subscription. I use mine for Ross over at More Games Please. So that's an easy way to support if you want, and that doesn't cost you anything more. But again, use it on another streamer as well. That's a great thing to do. But the more exciting thing that maybe has an actual, I think might have a bit of fun with the channel points. So you should see down below the chat, you'll be accruing game components, because you can never have too many game components as a game designer, and you can redeem them for various fun things, which you can discover for yourself. And maybe we'll discover some of them together today. I think I've set them up correctly. Do let me know if any of them seem really stupid. Let me know if you have some ideas of other ones you want me to add. I'm quite happy to do that. Yeah, so that's really cool. I'm glad I'm still doing this, and yeah, thanks very much for all of that. Yeah, yes, Robert, did you miss me shouting out? You're the one who got me over the line to affiliate status, so thanks very much. Yeah, happy to be on in the background. I will let my dulcet tones. I don't know if they're like, it's not the kind of like, when you have those Spotify playlists, which are certain beats per minute to like really get you working. I don't think I'm really that. I'm probably like I always like to be like the chilly pop beats if I can. And if I was going to have music in the background while these streams were playing, I'd have music like that. But maybe I'll do that once or twice. I should say also, I'm thinking about streaming a third day a week now, probably actually in the morning to try and have a different time slot. So I'm looking into streaming at either 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock European time on Wednesday mornings. I'm aware that there's streams at 10. I think it's 10 European time, which is 9 o'clock UK time. But if I stream at 9 European time, 8 a.m. English time's a bit early, if anybody would be even interested. I'm more interested actually in trying to open up, like, for example, people in Australia who, I'd love to connect with some gamers in Australia and great people there. It's 11. Okay, it's 11. Okay, all right. So that's a little bit later than I thought. So yeah, maybe I could do actually before Bez then. Yeah, because I don't really want to clash with Bez. I love what she's doing. So yeah, I'll see what I can do. But anyway, I'm looking into doing that. I'll announce it. Maybe I'll even do it this week, possibly. I understand, of course, that like people have different schedules, and that maybe the crowd that can make this sort of time might not make a much earlier stream. But and I'm not sure how different I would make it. I mean, I imagine it would be fairly similar, but maybe it'll be even more chilled out because it's kind of like the coffee morning breaks. Like Theo Revere does some really cool like coffee morning kind of streams, which is sort of like an inspiration for that. Yeah, so we'll see. But I am really enjoying streaming, and I think it could be kind of cool doing it at a different time. Actually having some sunlight. Actually, it's an interesting question. I have no idea whether this setup will work in the morning. So because there's actually quite a large skylight just here, and I don't know whether the sun will do restrictions. Anyway, it's all a bit inside baseball. I'm sure nobody's that interested in it. I actually just realized there was another bit of news which I have forgotten about, or forgotten to talk about, which I'm just going to very quickly find on my other screen to bring up. Again, I mean, if, funny thing, of course, about if I'm not going to share good news with you people, then who would I should be sharing it with? I learned over the weekend that I won an award, or one of my games won an award, which is really, really cool. And I'm now trying to find the tweet, which I had it. Where is it? Here. So, the Kangaroo Awards are a relatively new set of awards, and they're awards, Australian Game Awards that give the games. They have 3 categories. As far as I know, they have Game of the Year. They have a tweet with all the here. They have Game of the Year, best gameplay, and best visuals. And basically, the only requirement for the games is that there has to be a member of the creative or publishing team that is Australian. I'm Australian, in case anybody didn't know that. Yeah, we Monumental won for best visuals. So it's a funny thing in a way, because I don't actually have anything to do with the visuals out of all the kind of the involvement, but I'll take it. You know, huge props to a really diverse range of artists who worked on Monumental. I think there's like 15 different artists. And also big props to Philippe Noura, who's the CEO of Funforge, but also the creative director. And he did all the art direction, graphic design, everything for the project. So it's really good, and I really like what the award's trying to do. The nice thing actually is that they you also don't have to submit. You know, it's something that they automatically look at all the games, as many games as possible coming out during a year, and then make their judgments and things like that. So yeah, it was it's always a really nice thing. And so yeah, thanks very much to Kangaroo Awards. And yeah, and actually maybe think it would be nice to connect with the Australian crowd a little bit more, because I'm not homesick, but it's funny. I think, I miss that. The game design community there has grown a lot in the last 10 years, and I left about 11 years ago. So a lot has changed, and I'd just like to reconnect with it, I guess. So, and thanks to everyone who's saying congratulations comments. Really means a lot to me. Which reminds me, actually, I haven't really been following chat very well. Yes, happy hour is never an hour, so there's a little wiggle room. Yes. Okay. Well, maybe we'll get away from the kind of drinking connotations, but yeah, it's something similar to that, I guess. Nicola asks, what would your share game idea be? Yeah, so basically, if somebody redeems that, I will go into my notebook or notebook online. I basically have a treasure trove of unused game ideas, and I will just share it with the stream. And it is completely free and open for anybody to use and go off and work on. I have no ownership. These ideas are not games that I'm working on actively. If I start working on actively, I will try and remember. Maybe I'll keep a folder of things I've shared on stream, so that. But it's considered something open. Anybody can go, and maybe you'll get some inspiration there. It'll be useful. I've always believed in being as open as possible about ideas. I think there's always a bit of a mix, and maybe actually that will be an interesting future topic. Actually, the difference, how important are ideas? You hear a lot that ideas are a dime a dozen. They're not that important. It's all about execution and development, and that is true to a certain extent. But as I keep going on, I think more and more that is true a lot of the time. But there are some ideas which are just so good and so clean, even in that moment of inception, that even though, of course, they still need development as well, that idea being good or so far advanced at that very early stage is one of the most important things. So it's a bit of a mixed thing, but by far and large, like 95%, 99% of the ideas that I have are in the category of, they're a dime a dozen, and that actually sharing them is probably the best way that a game around them will ever get made, because I don't have time to work on that many things. So yeah, that share game ideas in the channel points or in the game component points. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, Theo does stream in French, much to my sadness, actually, because I really love his. I think he's streaming on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at the moment, 9 o'clock European time, which is 8 o'clock UK time. Yeah, and I can understand a very little bit. I have learned a little bit of French, but nothing very useful. But I always go in and say hi, and he's a really lovely guy. And I'm definitely going to try and have him on the stream sometime, because I love chatting with Theo. It's always a lot of fun. He's a great guy. He will also certainly lift the average sort of fashion level of the stream. I'm not sure if he's by far the most fashionable game designer I've ever met. If you think Rainer Knizia is the level of bow ties, Theo is a completely different level. I actually have to see if I can find some picture of him. He has the most amazing suits that he wears to any game convention. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to find it. I wonder if it's going to be funny if it somehow will pop up on images, but I don't know. I don't think I'm going to find it. No. Anyway. yeah, I'm not going to find it. Anyway, but yes, Theatre in French. Yeah, so that's kind of most of the news, I would say, for the day. Moving on to just a little bit of just general game design interest that maybe, or maybe I should call this like reading list or something like that. You know, there's if anyone supports Game Maker's Toolkit over on YouTube, he does. If you support him on Patreon, he has a really good. He always has like a reading list every month that he puts out, which I actually think is almost one of the most valuable things he does on Patreon. A side point of this is I can barely like log in. Like I've forgotten my login for Patreon for so long that I can't even see the rewards anymore. So I've been missing them for a while. But reading lists are just things that I've read in the week or that I find interesting or have just thought of that maybe you'll find interesting as well. This is a blog from the inimitable Tony Boydell, fantastic UK designer of Snowdonia, Lux Aeterna, bunch of games, and he also, well, maybe equally as known, is probably one of the longest running blogs on BGG. He's blogged like once a day for, it's got to be in the like 5 to 6 or even like 10 years. I don't know how long it is, but it's like a lot. And it's you know, I'd say it's mixed bag quality, but sometimes you see some really interesting insights into his process and his experience as a designer. He's done a lot of interesting things, and he wrote a really interesting post about IPs and how do you actually even go about, like, if you want to make a game with an IP, how do you go about actually like getting the rights to use that IP? He's made a few IP games, or one that I know of straight away is based on Ivor the Engine. I'm not British, so I don't have actually any connection to this. I, in fact, didn't know about Ivor the Engine at all before this game. Maybe people in the chat who know Ivor are much better than me. I understand it's sort of like a children's, you know, like a British Thomas the Tank, although is Thomas the Tank also British? So I don't know. Anyway, you know, really beautiful like animation and drawing and things like that. So Tony designed a game based on Ivor the Engine and got the permission to use the IP of Ivor the Engine, and he talks about that experience in this blog. And you know, how do you actually, like, even just the practicalities, like who do you contact, how do you go about that, how do you show the rights holder that you know what you're doing, how do you pitch for an idea? It's really, really interesting. And he's also done some stuff for this is like the Gruffalo, I think, like Games from the Deep Dark Wood. So this is sort of a it's a game which has like 4 games in one, and Tony has designed one of them. Brett Gilbert, like my erstwhile collaborator, has designed another one, and Andrew Harmon, also from Yay Games, who's another designer publisher in the UK. So they sort of organized this as well, and that, like, you can see Yay Games here. That's Andrew Harmon's company. We're actually also working. Andrew Harmon and I are working on a educational film game at the moment, which maybe we'll chat about at some point. Yeah, Thomas Tank is British too. Okay, Ivor is distinctly Welsh. Okay, all right. I will remember that better. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Anyway, so if you're interested, would definitely recommend this. I will put it in the chat. The thing. How do I put it in here? There you go. So yeah, definitely. If you're interested in like IP or even just a cool story, I would definitely have a read through it. A lot of interesting things. Tony now has a game with Gibson's based on London Underground called Race the Rails, which is also quite cool. It's sort of like almost like chaotic party game, almost, where you're sort of racing to do different tasks on the Underground, and it's got, you know, all the great kind of artwork, or like the kind of style of the London Underground. So so that was sort of what I came across in my reading just over the weekend. So check it out if IP kind of things interest you. Tony's also talked about, like, if you're interested in Ivor the Engine, there's other stuff on his blog about that process and meeting Peter Furman, the creator of Ivor the Engine, and that sort of experience. So it's would definitely recommend. So I think we are almost on to the main part of the day. Only half an hour in. Everyone's like, maybe we need to like run a poll of, like, you know, would you like me to go faster or slower? Like, do you feel like I'm keeping up with it? Alex, I've been enjoying the history of Surprise Stare's series now on Ben Maddox's podcast, which is an interview series with Tony and Alan talking about their game company history. Yeah, that's true. Actually, I can probably find it. Hold on. Yeah, I think I saw it pop up actually on my YouTube. So I should be able to find it. I wonder if that's going to work. Yeah, here we go. I'll pause it. Yeah. This is the first. Oops, I'll get the thing out of the way. Yeah, this is the first video history of surprises. So I think this was actually all filmed during Essen or UK Games Expo. It was like during one of the virtual conventions. So Alan Paul is so like Tony and Alan Paul and Charlie, the three of them together are kind of Surprise Stare Games, and Ben Maddox is a great podcaster interviewer based in Berlin. Yeah, and we were like, actually Brett and I were also on a different stream during this event, not like the history of Surprise Stare, but they ran a lot of interesting streams. So yeah, I can actually I can probably just drop I can link their channel, and you'll be able to get all their content there as well. Hopefully that works. Actually, yeah, you can even see on here. Well, Rob, just in time. Maybe we're about to have a chat with Rob, shall we? We were just chatting about the Surprise Stare videos. Yes, it is you. So Rob was on there, and I also mentioned that Brett and I were chatting once. So here we all meet. Must have just had a haircut. This must be like, I don't know where this was. It only put up in November, but they said during Spiel Digital. So like I don't know. This is like plus 2 months on my hair, I guess. So yeah. Anyway, check it out. A lot of like interesting viewing, and like it's worth much more than 12 views. Like I mean, like the content is of that quality that I hope more people will check it out. So cool. So contracts. What are, because I have to get to the point where I've forgotten who said it, but this stream seems to be a mix of like game design masterclass and random chat. And so we've now got to the end of the random chat half of the thing, and now we're in game design masterclass mode. Oh, you just got extra ads. Does anyone know how I can, like, is there ways I can change that or like reduce it? Because as I was saying earlier, I don't want ads if possible, to be honest. Maybe it's not possible. Maybe once you're affiliate, you just have to do it. Sorry about that. But if anyone knows if there's a way, like I've already tried to like change the preferences to make sure there's no ads in the middle or anything like that. But I am kind of still learning about it all. So anyway, sorry about that. So yeah, contracts. So I think that's it, unless you subscribe. Oh, I see. Everyone can subscribe. No, don't subscribe. Don't just use your money in well, if you just absolutely hate ads, then do that. But don't do that. don't do that. You spend your money on something else. Literally anything else. So yes, the background of this was that I was signed a contract today actually, and thought I'd go over a little bit about things that are important to consider when like negotiating a contract, but generally like just starting from the instance of you've made a game, you've pitched it to a publisher, they love it, you've talked about it, you've discussed your vision, you think you're happy with that publisher, and then they'll send you a draft contract. And I'm coming from that point of view where you've now got the contract. What are some things that you really want to check essentially? What are the really main things you want to have as clauses? What are some things to look out for? That's generally what we're talking about. So anyone who has had like experiences, feel free to put stuff in the chat as I'm talking. Like if what I'm saying doesn't quite match with your own experience, please, I'd really like to hear about other kind of viewpoints. If you have particular tips or tricks or things to think about, drop in the chat. If you have questions about contracts, this is the absolute time to ask. So please drop it in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer things as they go along. So I have a kind of a list in front of me, and I'm sort of going to be like stepping through, and these are kind of the different aspects that I consider important. Before I start going through that list, I will also once again make a point of the wonderful Cardboard Edison information. So they do a lot of these kind of surveys where they survey lots and lots of game designers about different aspects of contracts in particular, and they've kind of assembled this range of infographics or reports that are based on the results of those surveys. They're really, really interesting, and there's a lot of really great information in there. I wouldn't say that they necessarily are going to go into as much detail as I am going to about particular like things to look out for in this stream, but really, really do check them out. I'll throw their link in the chat, so hopefully that is fine. So yeah, do check out their reports. Support them on Patreon if you like what they're doing, because I recently just answered. I think they're preparing new results, because like near the start of this year, or like about a year ago, they had a new survey out which I answered. Basically involves putting information of your contracts like anonymously, like answering questions about the contracts you've signed. So I tried to do it for. It sounds a bit like humble brag, but there were quite a few contracts, like, because I think it had been 5 years since the last thing. So I've signed quite a few contracts in that time. So I tried to enter as many details as possible. Yeah, so they do really great work. I might try and step through a little bit near the end, because I think there's some interesting points that they raise, but I'll go through my own kind of points. I should also say a big thanks to Brett. These points that I'm actually referring to, mostly, we've developed together as a kind of a checklist for when we were getting contracts as collaborators, as joint designers. And Brett did kind of like the formatting or like organizing this list together. I mean, a lot of these things we discussed together, but couldn't do it without him. So thanks very much, Brett. Everyone, unfortunately, there's nowhere I can send people to like say thanks to Brett anymore, because he's not really on Twitter. Check him out on BGG and send him a geek mail and say thanks for helping Matt get organized about contracts or something like that. Just in case anyone's kind of interested in like the real life of a game designer, this is my folder where I keep all the kind of like literally like the paper copies of all the contracts. More and more are virtual now. I've definitely had some number of contracts which have been like e-signed and have gone through like DocuSign or different kind of softwares. That's only really just started this year, actually. Mostly you play this fun game of signing like a physical contract and then sending it. Publisher sends you like 2 copies, you sign one. Like maybe they've pre-signed both of them, they send you one, you sign both of them, and then you send one back, so you both have fully signed contracts. But with co-designers, I've had this kind of ridiculous thing where like they'll send me 3 copies, I have to send 2 to Australia, then one has to come back to Australia, to Europe, or we've had some funny things with that. But yeah, without much further ado, onto some things to think about with contracts. So what have we got? So starting off with scope. Scope is really talking about usually the like breadth of what the contract actually covers. So obviously it covers the design, but there are a couple other things that consider with scope. One is designers. So if you're a single designer, this doesn't really matter, because obviously the contract is with the designer, otherwise it wouldn't be with anybody else. But when you're, for example, co-designing, generally a really good thing to make sure you have is a single joint contract. In my experience, sometimes publishers have tried to have separate individual contracts for each co-designer, obviously with usually identical clauses, but definitely in my experience, it's a lot easier just to deal with one single document. You know that if you're both signing that document, it is absolutely the same because it's only one document. It's a lot simpler that way. And yeah, I'd always encourage, if you're collaborating, make sure there's just one document that everybody signs if you're co-designing. The scope can also relate to the kind of like how the rights are given to the publisher. So as a designer, you're essentially licensing the rights to publish the game to the publisher. That's the point of the contract. But you have to specify where the publisher is allowed to exercise those rights. So publishers will publish in different territories. Territories are like a collection of countries or a geographical area, or sometimes like a language area. So you might like say the German language rights, which would include like, for example, publishing the game and distributing, say, in Germany and Austria. We might say the French language rights, which might include France and parts of Canada, because there's a large French-speaking population in Canada, for example. Or it might be specific geographies like Europe or North America or anything like that. And in the contract, it should detail what territories this contract is going to refer to, and specifically the rights you're giving the publisher to exercise in which territories. There's a couple of different things to think about this. The first is, in my opinion, or at least the way I've operated, it's a lot easier if the publisher has worldwide rights. So basically, you're putting the onus back on the publisher to be the one that pursues publishing outside of territories that it might not normally already publish in. So the best case is you have a publisher that already publishes worldwide. They do it all. They directly publish everywhere, you know, like Hasbro or Ravensburger publishes in many territories, you know, by itself, or, you know, really big companies generally. Obviously, that's the best case, because you're signing your game over and it's going to have the widest distribution possible, and that's all covered by a single contract. The other thing that is also dependent, there's differences whether the publisher themselves are the one publishing and releasing the game, or if they're working with a third party, someone who will localize the game. That can have royalty implications, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But if the publisher themselves is releasing it worldwide, that's you know, kind of the win-win situation. This is kind of rare, though, that a publisher actually can release a game worldwide, but it is very common in a contract to give the worldwide rights to the publisher, which basically means then if, for example, it's a French publisher, you're putting the onus on that publisher to work out, say, how they're going to make a German language edition. They have to find a German partner. You're not going to find that partner. It's not your responsibility. It would be the publisher's responsibility. And as we go on to later on with sub-licensing, it should also cover in the contract, you know, what happens when they do that. So this question basically says how much control do you want? You know, some designers like to essentially negotiate different languages or different territories by themselves. Like they want to make an individual agreement for each territory, maybe for the same game. But I think really in the grand scheme of things, especially if you're sort of starting out as a designer, it's much simpler to, you know, for a company to have worldwide distribution. With the caveat that there has to be like a realistic expectation that they will do that. So have a look at what the publisher has done previously. Look at the previous games that they've published. Did they do multiple languages? If they did do multiple languages, which publishers did they work with to make those things? Did they publish it themselves in multiple languages, or did they work with a localizing partner? You know, how many languages were there? You know, what is it common that their games get localized? You know, these are things that you can definitely discuss. And actually, what I haven't said before, when I'm talking about all these things with contracts, if you have questions, if you have concerns, then, you know, the usual way it'll work is, you know, you'll get sent a contract and then they'll welcome your comments, suggestions, questions, queries. So like flag lots of things, say like, I don't understand this, or what does this mean? Or I actually would prefer this. You know, this is the point where, you know, before signing, you have all these discussions, you work out all these clauses. If you want a lawyer to see the contract, that's perfectly reasonable. I should have also said at the up front with all of this, I am not a lawyer. I have no legal training. This is based purely on my own experience. I have signed a lot of contracts by now and have had games released, but yeah, this is not legal advice. This is just, you know, experience essentially. Yeah, Rob, who has time for negotiating multiple territories? I'll tell you who. I definitely know Reiner Knizia does. Kind of definitely has mentioned multiple times that he wants control of that, and he will be very specific about how he assigns rights for his games in different languages. And you see, Pursuit, like there are different versions of his games in different languages, even different art styles. I know, like Quest for El Dorado, like the recent Ravensburger game, it's being published. There's like a new artwork edition that was, I think, a Polish edition or something. I can't quite remember, but that's him, you know, him organizing that. But I would still say, like, the general case for most people is, yeah, who has time for that. And normally the publisher will have better contacts to be able to make that happen than you will. So yeah, the only caveat is that if the publisher looks like there's no real like intention for them to publish in any other language, like, you know, if they're a German company and when you ask them, are you going to publish in other languages? If they say no, then it might be worth saying, you know, specifically in the contract saying that, yeah, the scope is for this country, for this market, for sale in Germany and Austria in this language. So yeah, make a decision about that, basically. Alex says, don't know if he does this, but Justin Jacobson previously offered to look over designer contracts for people. He is a lawyer. Okay, interesting. Do you have a link? Is he on Twitter, or like where do you get in touch with this person. I should say there are also other. So in Germany, there's the SAV, which is, I'm pretty sure it's SAV. It's like the Game Designers Association, and you can pay a fee to be a member each year. I think the fee is about like 50 to 75 euros. And as part of being a member of the SAV, you do have access to SAZ. Thank you, Fabio. Hey, how you going? Are you a member of the SAZ, Fabio? Just by the way, I was a member of the SAZ. I want to say like four or 5 years ago. I was a member for about a year. There are some interesting benefits to that. I'm pretty sure you do have access to like some contract consultation where you can send them contracts and they get a lawyer to look over them. I don't know if they do that in other languages other than German necessarily. Yes, they did a thorough review of each contract. So you have used their service then, Fabio, you're saying, okay, cool. And they do it in English. Okay, so maybe I can have a look and find this SAZ website. So that is one option. Maybe Spiel, I guess. SAZ, yeah. So it's here. Yeah. So this is SAZ. Oh wow, they have a quote from Angela Merkel as the way they're starting off with. Yeah. So and you can become a member. I don't know how you say the member. How do you work out? How do you become a? Oh, here we go. Become a member. Look at the big red button on the top, right? Everyone's at home, like, look at the red button in the top right-hand corner. So yeah, these are all the kind of various things you can do. Various benefits. There's some publications. Strengthens you get ticket discounts. You get free entrance to Nuremberg actually, which is quite useful if you're going to the toy fair in Nuremberg. You can get reduced tickets for Spiel. And some other conventions. They have support with contracts, and there's other sort of things. So yeah, definitely check them out. I will throw the link. I don't know how international they are, and that's something that I would just check, I guess. I know definitely in Europe they're very active. I don't know what it's like if you're, say, an American or something like that, if it's as useful to you. But yeah, but that's another. And also I missed Alex said about Justin Jacobson's on Twitter. Hopefully that everyone can see that link, right? It's like enabled that people see it. Anyway, so yeah, those are sort of caveats about where to go for legal advice if you want to do that. I should say, rightly or wrongly, I've never had to seek specific legal advice myself. And I've been okay. Of course, that is not a very good, a good reason to say that everything will be all right. But just in the interest of openness, like I myself haven't needed a lawyer to do anything as yet. Fabius says they're mostly European centered with branches of your country, including Italy, where you are. Yeah. So I think Germany, probably like Germany, France, and Italy. I'd say they're the strongest. But if they're doing things in English and you're based in Europe, I think UK member. I was in the UK when I was a member before, and I think that was probably. Actually, 5 years ago, they were probably even less kind of like bilingual. Like there were much more things in German, whereas I think it's a little bit more even now. Rob says, that brings up, have you always been able to negotiate contracts in English? Yes. I would never sign a contract in another language. My experience is that if a publisher wants to work with someone who doesn't speak their language, it's their responsibility to be able to offer a contract in that person's language. Yeah. Sometimes it means there's like a little bit of editing, and there can be some weird things like with translation. Like bigger publishers are used to it. They work with designers from all around the world already. Yeah, I would never ever sign a contract in not in my native language or in a language which I didn't have a in-depth understanding of. Yeah, thankfully I haven't had a problem with that. Yeah, that's probably the kind of main scope things. And the other thing with scope is it will, contracts will sometimes talk about, they'll cover the game itself, but they might talk about derived works. So these can be expansions, or it can be things like digital versions or merchandise or TV shows. There often are a few stock clauses that you see in a lot of contracts which sort of cover like, any derived work, and there's like quite a long list of, TV show, merchandise, book, blah, 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 blah. you know, usually it's good to make sure that it's sort of covered in the contract. It's a very basic way. It can even be in the contract that it's just a part of the contract if other items or new works, sort of on the non-game side, that either you will get a set royalty and you can ask about that, or that you can be said that, you know, each thing will be dealt with if it comes about, and that, you know, they're required to negotiate a new contract for that. The more important thing is game expansions or like derivations of works where like you as a designer may want to be involved. And that can be something to look at. You know, a good clause to have is that you kind of have the first, that you as the author have the first right to provide a design that the publisher might want for a new work in that line. So that might be an expansion, or it might be like a new standalone game, or some tie-in. You can ask for that. That's a reasonably common thing, but it's not always covered. You know, there are some games where it's hard to see where that would happen, and often if you do an expansion, that just because you don't have a clause in the original contract, you know, you may just do a new contract for the expansion. You know, but it's certainly something to bring up with the publisher, to sort of cover if you really have an idea that you think there may be expansion, or even if you don't, it's a useful thing to just have it covered there. And yeah, it should be that it covers, you know, whether you're going to do. The other point with that is that, and that I've had a little bit happening recently, is that with games where there's an expectation that other people may work on installments of the game, that's actually quite usual. So with a lot of these narrative games, yeah, you know, you're not going to be, you might be involved with the series and you may have designed the overall thing. I think I've... Hello, can people hear me? I have a bad feeling my oh gosh. I'm back, hopefully. I hope. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna probably have to upgrade my software. I don't know if it's what's going on. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so if there's a reasonable expectation that other people are going to work on the game, it's definitely worth covering that in the contract and clearly stating, for example, how royalty splits will work. And maybe I'll talk about this royalties later, but you know, if you as the designer should get a royalty even if you don't make the next thing. So if you don't design the next expansion or you don't do the next scenario, you should still get a cut of that as the designer of the original idea. And you can work out some split, but that should be specified. And that is a useful thing to try and cover, especially, you know, in these narrative games where you're going to have lots of scenarios and there's a really good expectation that other people will work on it. It's good to cover that in the contract. Yeah, so that's the kind of scope stuff. Next up is accreditation. I mean, this one is fairly simple in terms of things to look out for. Make sure you have a clause that states that your name is going to be on the rules in the box of the game, and you should define how you want your name to appear, because maybe it's not the name you would use in a legal sense. Maybe you have a pseudonym. Maybe you have some other way that you want to appear as a designer, like in the public, and you would want that to be specifically detailed in a clause in the contract. This is also the point where you would sort of talk about, you know, if it's a co-design, like how do royalties get split? So you want to define like what the split of royalties is, you know, 50-50, if there's two of you, for example, that should be specifically said. And the last thing is sort of talking about, usually there's a clause which will talk about that you're by signing this, you are the designer saying that the rules in the game design is your intellectual property. This isn't replicating something else by someone else other in the world. And that you're also sort of clarifying the status of any intellectual property that you're assigning over to the company, that you're licensing to the publisher to be able to you know, make works of. Usually that sort of stuff is quite standard language, and you know, we've never really had to worry about it. I hope nobody's trying to sell games that they've stolen off other people. Don't do that. So yeah, I mean, if you're acting in good faith and you have made a new game, then that should all be fine. Yeah, so that's kind of, it's a pretty short thing usually, the accreditation, but it's worth looking, especially just making sure that your name should be on the box and should be on the rules. Yeah. Robert, a pseudonym is a common thing. I've had this discussion with a few people about if we want our real name on a box. Yeah, I definitely know of a few different cases of different ways pseudonyms are worked. I mean, maybe one of the more, famous, I guess, is Prospero Hall, which is the pseudonym. I hope I'm using the word pseudonym right. Someone's going to quickly tell me in the chat if I'm using this the wrong way. But it's a pseudonym for the team at Funko. Well, that was at Forest Pruzan and now at Funko Games. So on the kind of designer games, they would be said it's by this Prospero Hall person, which isn't a real person. So that's a case where it doesn't make, like in a designer case, it doesn't make sense to put a company on the box. It would feel a bit strange. So they sort of came up with this kind of person. Some people have a sort of a nickname. There's Ode, O-D-E, so the designer of La Granja. I actually don't know his or her real name, but I don't think it's Ode. That's something to look at. And so that I think that's more of a case of a nickname or things like that. And I know an instance actually of a designer who, for reasons they wanted to actually remain anonymous. They were worried that in their they're not a full-time game designer. They were just designing on the side, and in their real job, they didn't want their employer to know that they were working on games because they were worried that was going to cause some problem for them in the workplace. So they released their game under a pseudonym, and there's no photo of them in the the box or rules or anything like that. And that's known. So yeah, there are actually a surprising number actually that people choose to do that. Yeah. Andreas Odenhol. Okay, so I guess Ode is not actually so much of a pseudonym, but yeah, it's I should know that actually because I think I follow him on Twitter, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So yeah, more common than I would say, I guess, is what I say. My mouse and everything has decided to stop working. One day I will get an actual PC. I'm just so used to my life running on a laptop, which is great, but I think at some point it's just not enough to handle streaming, maybe. So might also be the reason why I keep dropping out, but we'll see. I was holding my teacup and I will actually drink. I mean, now that we have, these channel points that, where people say hydrate, maybe I'm not allowed to drink unless someone tells me to, but for now, I'm going to do what I want, damn it. Next, chatting about royalties. I mean, this is maybe, I mean, I guess it's probably the first thing a lot of people think about when they think about contracts, like negotiating the royalty rate. And realistically, like it is obviously an important part, but there are a bunch, as hopefully this is showing, there are a lot of different things to be thinking about when you look at contracts, other than just the royalty. But obviously, the first thing to sort of think about is the actual value of the royalty, and this is something that actually might be interesting to look at the cardboard essence sort of stuff. Hold on, let me find the thing, because I don't actually have something on. Maybe I'm missing the thing that was talking about. Oh, where's the percentage stuff? Royalty type, royalty rate. Here we go. So, oh no, I'm not sharing anymore. Share that screen. Okay, here we go. So these are like royalties. I mean, the first thing to consider, as they say, like what kind of royalty you get. I'm not going to go too much into like the different. I mean, I would actually say this is one of the areas, if anything, with all the royalties and stuff about sub-licensing and how that's calculated. I'm almost like the first time you interact with a publisher, I think it's always worth actually directly asking that publisher to give a concrete example about how they calculate royalties. because my experience is that even though publishers might use very similar language, it really can vary quite a bit. And I think for you to have the most information about what you're signing, it's actually best to get it in like really plain language. Like tell them, please, can you give me some examples? Like of if this game was signed at this price point and you sold this much, what would be the actual royalties? Because I think that's the best way to explain it. The most common way is this, as shown in this, like a flat percentage of the game's wholesale price. So you get paid X% of the wholesale price. And the wholesale price is the price that a wholesaler pays to buy it from the publisher. A wholesaler is not a retailer. It's usually someone like a distributor. Usually that's around 40% of the retail price, not always. And that's why I say getting a specific example with specific numbers from the publisher is really important, because like all these things have assumptions that are different. Like what is are they selling to distributors, or are they selling to there are like aggregators, which are like even above distributors in some way? Are they selling to retailers directly? That will all differ in like the wholesale price. So what that percentage actually means, what does it equate to in terms of cash? Sometimes it can be the retailer price instead. Sometimes it's a percentage of the publisher's profit, which can mean different things in the way how they account profit. If they do that, you really need to have in the contract specifically them specifying how they calculate profit, because what expenses do they take into account, et cetera, et cetera. So these are things to definitely look into and ask for a specific example. Shout out to Alley Cat Games, for example, which I think is one of the best examples, like in the contract, giving a really detailed breakdown. The other thing I'm not actually going to get into probably very much is Kickstarter, how Kickstarter kind of changes a lot of this. And it's interesting how important Kickstarter is, and also how more recently it's become more and more important that it's not actually included in the list, like checklist that we have. But I think it's more and more common that I would ask, at least ask the publisher what's their intention for the game. If there's any chance they might kickstart it, make sure that you have kickstarting specifically referenced in the contract and how that affects royalty rates and things like that, because it's reasonable, in my opinion, that you should get a higher percentage of games that are kickstarted, because obviously these are being sold directly to the consumer. There's kind of a higher risk to you because there's a chance that it might not get published for a long time. But that's, again, a discussion I have with the publisher. But again, it should at least be specified, should be covered. But what we were sort of coming here was to look at the royalty rate and, what's the kind of common thing. And somewhere in that kind of 5 to 8% of wholesale is pretty normal. You're going to, obviously, a retail rate will be lower because the price that they sell to retail is usually higher than they do wholesale. So normally you'll get a smaller percentage. So for example, and it kind of depends because the difference in rate in that can be, it's not always 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or whatever. Again, worth getting a specific example. I personally think that for a long time, in my opinion, 5% of wholesale price was kind of like this standard that I think a lot of publishers defaulted to, and colloquially when people thought about royalty rates, that's what you would have. I think it can be better than that. I've certainly signed my fair share of contracts with better terms than that. Everything depends on the publisher, and feel free to negotiate as you wish. I think something like 6% is certainly reasonable in a first instance, but I struggle to sort of say that there's a set rate that you shouldn't accept or not. Things vary wildly depending on publishers, depending on what's the expected amount they're going to print. Obviously, they're going to print a lot more than maybe you're happy to accept a lower percentage rate. Definitely do not accept lower than 5. But yeah, there's no strong absolute minimum, I would say. Well, 5 is the absolute minimum, but yeah, negotiate for what you can, I guess, would be my bigger point. But yeah, but this obviously shows that there's a lot of people, some percentage definitely getting paid more than 5%. Yeah, but of course, publishers are going to have different levels of investment in the game. Some might really do an amazing job investing a lot in artwork and components in your game, and that will change their cost, and that might change how much royalties they're going to offer you. And then it's up to you. That's a balance. Do you want, do you want a higher royalty rate, or are you happy to take slightly lower royalty rate, but to have a higher quality product and maybe a higher success? but obviously that's something to look at. Some other things that sometimes you see are increasing rates of royalty as the publisher sells more of the product. So maybe, you start at 5%. Once you've sold 10,000 copies, it goes to 6%. 20,000 copies, it goes to 7%, or at like different numbers. Maybe those numbers are usually like 100,000 or 200,000. That could be a nice thing. It's worth asking about if you want, because essentially there are like a number of fixed costs like artwork that don't need to keep getting paid as you keep printing the game. So in some ways it makes sense that you get to share more, in more of the kind of like the profit as the game gets reprinted more. It's a nice thing to ask about. I've definitely seen in some contracts. Also here, you should be covering the percentages for other things. So if there's an electronic version of the game, or if there are promotional items, these all should be covered here, what the royalty rates would be for them. Possibly expansions, but usually they'll get negotiated when you actually, if there is an expansion. And the other main thing is, the two other main things around royalties is, one is the advance. So an advance is an advance on royalties. So it's the amount of money that you receive immediately after signing the contract. And then it's deducted from the royalties, like the money you would gain from royalties later. Usually it's deducted from the first royalty payment. Sometimes you sign a game, you get an advance, and the game never sells enough to actually recoup, that it would pay enough royalties to like completely go over what the advance was. So you actually might never see any more money than what you get than the advance. But if there would be a point, I'd say here, really, really try and get an advance every time you sign a game. I honestly don't think there is a very good reason for a publisher to not offer an advance. I'm not saying it has to be particularly large. Even something around like the 250 to 500 pounds range, which I would say, given the scale of even a small budget game, it's not a lot of money, but it indicates a serious intent on terms of publisher, that they want it, that they're going to invest in your game immediately and they're serious about publishing it. That's really important, I think, to not accept no advance. It's definitely happened to me a few times. Actually, quite surprisingly, with a few larger publishers who were actually quite stubborn in not offering an advance. And that was actually like a real disappointment about working with that publisher. At some point, with all these things, you have to work out what's the most important to you and where you're kind of going to draw a line. But I really think, advances should be standard, because, you're essentially at the point where you sign the contract, you're often giving the game might not be released for another couple of years. So you're not going to earn any more money on that game. So at the very least, getting an advance means you've got some money to show for it, because a lot of stuff can happen after you sign a contract. It's not a guarantee for the game to be published. So it's certainly something to look at. And this is also the point where you would probably talk about sub-licensing and things like this. And it should detail, especially when we talked about like the scope earlier about like worldwide distribution or not, it should cover like what is the percentage royalty you're going to get if the game is sub-licensed to like a localizer in another country. So the way that normally works is that when say a publisher is based in Germany, they publish a game and they want to make a French version. They work with a French publisher who's going to localize it and then release and distribute it in France. That French publisher will pay a royalty on every copy they sell back to the original publisher that you had the contract with. And then that publisher will then pay you some percentage of that royalty. So it's called sub-licensing, where you're taking the original license agreement and you're sub-licensing it to a third party. And it should determine what percentage of that royalty that gets sent from the sub-licenser to the licenser, what percentage you should get. Percentages here kind of vary really wildly, and just as much as I was sort of saying, getting a actual example of the royalties, sub-licenses are even harder to understand in some ways, and they're even more variant in how they're described. So again, get them explained properly. As a basic thing, somewhere between 25 and like 40 or 50% of that royalty you should be getting. That I would say that's about standard, like 20 to 40%, somewhere in that range. Again, it depends wildly, but it's something to definitely check out and to make sure you know what's going on there. Okay, we'll take a quick brief. So someone should, someone tell me a joke in the chat or something. Feels like, yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is if it's particularly useful. It's one of these things that I think is like it's kind of useful when you're in the moment of doing it, and it's a very specific moment. But most designers, obviously, this is not something you deal with day in day out. And if you're beginning as a designer, it's you haven't gone through it yet. So obviously, there's a lot more other things to worry about before you do that. Yeah, oh, and also telling you, okay, yeah, that was, sorry, off for a different point. I'll try and breeze roughly, we're all quiet. Yeah, I know that's, I really like, I guess it's funny, isn't it? It's not really a topic that's very like interactive, and if you don't have experience, then it's not much fun. But okay, as long as I know people are there and it's interesting. Too busy dreaming of my first advance. Yeah, don't spend it all at once, But yeah, no, it's a nice feeling, certainly. I'll try to get through the remaining bits in not too much time, because they're maybe not as, well, they're a little bit more standard, I guess. So invoicing and payment, hopefully a contract will tell you when you're going to get paid and how often you're going to get paid. Yeah, thanks, Rob. I need some sorry, I need you all to stoke my feeble ego or whatever at all times. No, thanks. Yeah, it should tell you when you're going to get paid. So you're going to get paid once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year, and it should tell you like what date. It actually is quite important for them to put the date. So like, for example, like if they're doing it maybe once a year and they should invoice you by the end of January, then that gives you a good, like, the point when the game's released, and when you can kind of like harry them for the reports. So like if you get to the end of January and you haven't heard anything, and you say, okay, look, according to the contract, you need to send me the reports for the game. And if it's detailed there, specific date, then you know that. And it's good just to know yourself, like, if you thought, like, hold on, I haven't heard from that published for a while. When are they going to pay me? If it's in the contract, then you can check and And often, of course, this will all happen a long time after you sign the contract. So you're not going to remember it unless it's written down. Also can be worth saying how they're going to pay you. Is it going to be electronic transfer? I hope that's standard. I have had 1 or 2 cases where a publisher really wanted to pay with a check. But I think nowadays that's pretty much like everything should be electronic, but you should check with. Oh, well, thanks very much, Jay. Thanks very much. Yeah, feel free to come back when anyone's signing a contract. You can watch the full 1 hour kind of ramble or whatever like that. Yeah, so that's kind of invoicing and payment. Again, like a lot of these things are not usually very contentious. Like everyone kind of agrees that this is more information that you just need to make sure that's actually in the contract. Something else that's kind of related to, in terms of like the most kind of like tangible thing you're going to get out of your deal, are designer copies of your game. You should always be receiving copies of your game, and that should be, again, detailed in the contract. My opinion is that you should get somewhere between 10 to 12 games of like the first edition of your game. It depends a little bit on the size of the game, and like sometimes that number is almost dependent on like how many they expect to be in a box, because often they'd send you a full like carton, and cartons can be like 4 or 6 or 10. If it's important to you, this is also something that's easy to ask at this point. Like I've often had, people might have a standard like 6 copies in the contract, and I say, look, especially when games have been playtested by a lot of people, I love being able to give a copy of the game to someone who's playtested the game as a thank you for that. But also it's nice to be able to give it to family members or friends and things like that. They make really nice gifts. And this is the time to ask. And, for some publishers, like the difference between 6 and 12 is very little. So that, it's worth asking. I usually haven't had much problems asking for that. And then the other thing you can, and also like you should check if it's co-design, like what's the split, like how many you're actually getting each. And then you can also talk about like license editions or reprints that you might get, like a few copies of license edition, like other language editions or reprints. I did go through a time kind of recently actually where I really wanted a copy of every language of one of my games that have been released. and I guess it's a purely ego thing because you know, I would want to keep one as a kind of like an archive, I guess, of all of, and that's kind of a nice thing. It's, you know, it's my work. It's nice to see it out there. Also for some more kind of exotic foreign languages, I know there's been like some Russian copies of versions of my games, the Japanese and things like that. That can be cool. And so there was a while that I really wanted to get one of each. The amount I've moved in my life, I've moved, you know, I think in the last 10 or 15 years, I've lived in like 12 or 13 different places, including like 3 different countries. So yeah, as Rob has said, they can really mount up. Yeah, it's true. And there's a point where I was like, am I prepared to sort of carry around what is essentially like this bulk of games the rest of my life, which I'm not really necessarily going to open and play, that they're just some, you know, like archive, you know, what am I prepared to? So I've sort of gone off of that a little bit, like really requiring it, but it's something, if it's important to you, get it covered in the contract, hopefully. I think it's a reasonable request to get a copy of each language. Sometimes, unfortunately, like logistically, it can be quite difficult because sometimes those copies are like produced locally. So for the publisher you're dealing with, like in my German and French example, like maybe you've got the agreement with the German publisher, but the French publisher is producing and distributing in France. So it can be a bit difficult because like they have to get French people to send you a copy and blah, blah, blah. None of it is that impossible, and it should, you know, it's something to ask about. I imagine the big wall Roberta Fraga has in his studio. Yeah, I don't know, actually. I don't know who's... Yeah, I mean, you sometimes see on Twitter people, and it's great. Like, you know, you love seeing like this stack of games with different languages and seeing how people publish it. And especially if it is actually different in some way, if the publisher has used different artwork, or that could be a really great reason to get a copy. And I just know in my experience, it's a hard thing to get as a clause in a contract because that core publisher, you know, has also okay. So you've seen the copy. This big wall, Nicola. Yeah, I didn't know there was one. Yeah, it could be hard to get as a clause in contract, but ask about it. You never know. Now thinking about it, there are a couple of like games I'd love to have, especially in Czech, because I'm in the Czech Republic. There's been a few Czech editions. I have a couple of my games, but there's one like Professor Evil I don't have a Czech edition of, for example, which I might try and get, which would be nice. The only other thing with designer copies is another thing to try and get in a contract that's worth asking about is the ability to buy additional copies of your game at a reduced cost, at like distributor cost, which is like 40% of the registered MSRP. That is something that is definitely worth asking for. Most publishers will grant it. It's just a way that, you know, like if you want to give gifts to people, if you want more copies of your game to distribute for any reason, then it's a reasonable thing that you should be able to get them directly from the publisher and pay a reduced cost. I think that's very reasonable and a good thing to get in the contract. I've never taken a publisher up on that. I have had several times where I've asked a publisher for additional copies of a game, and actually in most cases, very kindly, they've sent them to me for free. So that happens as well, which is really great. But you know, there's no legal obligation for them to do so. So it's worth, you know, getting that in a contract as well. We've got two more sections in this marathon. Termination, and it's actually a bit of a pity that I left termination near the end because this is where everyone is asleep. In the class. I used to have when I was an undergraduate in Sydney in science, I had one lecturer who would always play like a funny YouTube video at the halfway point just to wake everybody up. So maybe I should try that. Nicola said he posts pictures of his studio sometimes on Facebook, a couple of nice pictures of him when he was building this huge wall as well. Oh, okay, cool. I'll have a look for that. Rob says, I think I have a clause of can purchase with big discount, but not for resale unless by further agreement. Yeah, I should have said that that's usually the agreement, that you're allowed to buy them for like personal use, and you can't sell them. But I do know that there have been instances where, you know, if a publisher isn't distributing, say in the country you live, you can work out a way that you are allowed to resell them. I do know some designers who have done that. So like if you do live in a country where, yeah, you would be the only way that your game could get out there, and you're happy to do that. If you're going to conventions and you want to be able to sell your game, you can also, you know, you can talk to publishers about that and see if you can get that in a contract. Good to hear, Alex. Good to hear that you're still there. Termination, probably one of the most important, and I would say one of the most common things that you have to give feedback to a publisher to get them to change, because they don't cover enough of the sort of scenarios in which rights should revert to you. So termination really is all talking about that you're signing over the rights to publish your game, you're licensing those rights to a publisher, but that shouldn't be indefinitely. And termination is covering all the instances in which those rights would revert back to you, at which point then you could go off and find another publisher and license the rights to them. And there are a lot of different ways in which they should cover in separate clauses when they should return to you. The first is that there should be an automatic way that the contract will be terminated and rights reverted to you if the game is not published within a set time frame. So normally it should say, the rights will return to designer if the game is not published by June 2021. Or it might say 18 months from the date of the signing of the contract, which again is a specific date. Really, really important to have this. Some publishers will be wary, and sometimes you might have to give like a longer period of time than like 18 months. So I'd say somewhere between like 2 to 3 years is a normal period of time that's acceptable. I think more than 3 years is too much. I would say like a lot can happen in 3 years. If you say like within 4 years, then they've got the game for 4 years and they don't have to publish it. That's a really long time, and there's a bigger risk like with that amount of time that it might not get published at all. I think somewhere really between the 18 to 24 months, I think is the best situation, and I think the best compromise. So you definitely need that. There needs to be a clause to say if the company goes out of business or ceases to trade, that the rights revert to you. Really important to have that in the contract, because often if a company goes out of business, you might not be able to contact them anymore. They might not be answering emails. So you need to have a contract that you can defend and that has specifically, a clause for that. Another very common thing is that the rights will revert to you after, at the end of a period where the publisher doesn't sell a certain number of the games. So it might say, at the end of a year, like say a year is an accounting period, if within this year we've sold fewer than 1,000 units, then you can then ask for the rights to return back to you. Usually the clause is stated, sometimes it's automatic, that they'd automatically return back to you, but often it'll say that you have to like voluntarily ask for them back. But if you do ask for them back, then they do come back. They can't refuse to give them back to you if they've sold fewer than a set number of units. And this is kind of useful to basically say, like, when the game gets to the kind of end of its natural life, then this is kind of the most common way that the rights would revert. That once you have that, you can tell them, okay, well, you're not selling the game much. It also means if the publisher doesn't make an effort to, if they do publish the game but they don't make any effort to market it or to sell it, then you have a way to get the rights back in that instance. And it should tell you like the volume or the sometimes it can be the amount of royalties, or it can be the actual like number of units sold, and it should tell you the time period in which it would look over. In how long of a time period does that quota have to be met, essentially. And there might also be a clause where disregard everything, that say in 10 years time this is automatically like this contract has to be automatically renegotiated. I don't see it that much, but yeah, that's important. The other sort of thing is to try and put a clause in to say that you still are paid royalties even once the contract is terminated. Usually there's a provision to say, like, if the contract is terminated, especially by the designer, say if for whatever reason, then the publisher has the right to like kind of try and sell the remaining copies. Making sure that you're still paid royalties even when the contract is terminated can be important as well. I would say this is like, maybe I should have put it at the top, and it's not as kind of like as sexy a topic maybe, but it's really important to cover, because this is like the most common thing that's going to happen. Like if something is going to go wrong, it's going to have to do with this. It's going to have to do with the publisher not publishing a game in a timely fashion. It's going to be the publisher releasing a game but not selling well. These are the most common ways that you need to cover your rights returning, and it's the most common thing that you'll be, apart from like say royalties and payments, that like practically you'll be dealing with a contract. So it's really worth going over that carefully and making sure each of those instances are covered. And then finally, there's a bit generally about indemnity. It's worth. There can be a lot of really strange clauses sometimes included in contracts about like who's liable for like damages or if there are problems with the game. And I would just say, like, kind of the point of this section about indemnity is to really, you obviously should always be carefully reading the contracts, and you really have to carefully read anything that might like assign any sort of like responsibility or liability to you as a designer based on what the publisher is publishing. In all cases, there shouldn't be any legal burden on you as the designer, like because of the product that the publisher is going to make. I think that's perfectly reasonable clause to have. And usually the standard clauses do say exactly this, but sometimes there's been some non-standard things that have slipped in the contracts and which would have said like, like the designer is liable if something goes wrong, or and that's, that is where it really pays to read carefully and like go like, I'm sorry, publisher, this doesn't make sense. I shouldn't be liable for the product you're gonna release with my design. So it's just worth looking at that. The other sort of thing is also what are the responsibilities that any other responsibilities the contract places on you as the designer. Not so much about liability, but sometimes there might be clauses about, that you're supposed to do a certain amount of promotion for the game, or you're supposed to contribute to marketing, or you're supposed to, do X, Y, and Z. It's up to you how you want to deal with that, how much you want to like kind of devote to, marketing the game or anything around that. But just look out for that. If you don't, I don't really think it's reasonable that you be contractually obligated to do any of these things. These things are reasonable expectations that the publisher should be taking care of. So I don't think there's any reason why you should have any clauses that give you these added responsibilities. And again, be careful, read carefully, and give the feedback to the publisher if you don't agree with those things. And I think that is basically yeah, it's basically the end of the list of things to sort of think about. Yeah, so I mean, hopefully that was sort of vaguely useful. But yeah, like obviously do let me know if I think like anywhere in the future, if there are ever a question about contracts, then it's a perfect thing to bring up on stream later on, even when I'm not specifically talking about contracts. And yeah, definitely check out the SAZ. I think professional bodies are obviously very useful in these cases. Will there be a test on this? Maybe I should have had I'm sure that's the most fun everybody wants to have on a Monday evening is a lecture and then a test. But yeah, hopefully vaguely useful. Yeah. I was thinking, yeah, I need some. I now understand why people like do like marble runs and things. So you need some like sort of like levity after what might have been quite a like serious and thought out topic. But yeah, hopefully it was useful. I could like try it. We could make up a random. What is it again? Like randomizer It's like board gameizer, right? Which is the board gameizer, or is it Izer? Yeah. How do game designers have fun? They just randomly come up with random games. We can have an economy management game or resource management game about quartz, iron, go-kart racing. That's interesting. Where you have to win a specific number of rounds. Have you got any of that? Hopefully there will be a practical test eventually, i.e. a contract assigned. Absolutely, yeah. I really hope so, Nicola. If you ever get that. Jay asks, would you have the contract terminate if the publisher merges with another? That's a good question. Usually, I've never had this happen to me. Oh, actually, no, I have. Well, I guess I've had publishers be acquired by other publishers, and usually in that case, the contracts are automatically, the new publisher will reach out and you'll sign a new contract, which will be usually based on, the previous terms of the contract. Usually it's just changing the name of who the license is with. You can add that if you want as a contract, or you can say that, it's requiring the publisher sorry, it's requiring a contract renegotiation if the publisher merges with another or changes ownership. Yeah, you can definitely ask about that. It hasn't come up that much, but yeah, it's something certainly to look out for, I guess. Specific numbers rounds fits the racing. Oh yeah, whoops, back to the board game idea. Yeah, well, I guess that would. Yeah, it's a bit like the what were those cycling? The cycling, you know, like the Kieran. No, what are those different like cycling things which are done over like 50 rounds or something? Not a peloton. They used to be in the Olympics, and they're the ones that you'd have like these massive crashes because they were the cycling ones where you'd be on a velodrome, like the Curie or something like that. I think they were called. There were also these kind of crazy rules about like you would only like every 10 laps you would have to, you know, you'd try and like be in the top 4 and you'd be like accumulating points. Madison, yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's definitely one of them. Definitely something to look up. You know, there's a whole bunch of different events around this that all have like really fun, interesting rules. Nicola, in the early stages, but I appreciate all and like, no, absolutely, I really enjoyed the games you were working on, Nicola. So I really hope, I hope it is soon. Yeah, maybe Madison cycling race, I guess. Oh yeah, here we go. It's relay. Oh, it's a relay event. Yeah, where you have to like. Each team must complete more laps than any of the other team, and you sort of alternate as you go through. And then there's a whole bunch of rules. Yeah, but I'm sure that there are like different. Yeah, the Kieran, that's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, pacing. Yeah, basically you have to like stick behind. They have like a pace that you have to stick with, and then there are different points in which and they get faster and faster as the race goes on. So Royal Ironman go-kart. Yeah, I mean, just start with that. What's the constraint? People want to know the constraint. Whoops. What is the constraint? Players should stand. I mean, I guess if it's an exciting enough game, then hopefully everyone should be standing up and getting excitement. Economy management. Well, but yeah, like as Rob said, like fuel management, or like what they do in Flamme Rouge, you know, where you're kind of like managing your different races and the cards and that kind of exertion and things like that. Maybe in these, you know, especially in these like team cycling races, you know, if each of your races has different characteristics and you've got to work out what's your best way to manage them and use them at the right time. So yeah, maybe could be fun. Who knows? Flamme Rouge, the card game. Okay, nice to see you, Alex. Thanks for coming by. Have a good rest of the week. I'm probably not going to be hanging around for too much longer either. Yeah, so we get into sort of the last 5 minutes or so, I guess. If anyone has any more questions or things they want to share. Everyone has the management of fuel, tires, etc., depending on the rules for that season. That's true. I guess like any of these, like also you can kind of think of these like sports management games, like FIFA Manager or whatever, where you're managing your different teams, or like fantasy football is also like an interesting like sports management sort of games. Yeah, but if there's any question or anything, do let me know. I will be back on Friday, as always. Maybe on Wednesday, who knows? There may be a bonus surprise Wednesday morning stream. I'll have to see if I can fit it in. But I really think I would like to do Wednesdays, potentially. Well, we'll see. We'll see if the audience is there. But it might be kind of a relaxed morning thing. And yeah, as always, you can contact with me on Twitter and at Wise Goldfish. Yeah, but thanks for hanging. Thanks for the hardy 8 souls who have hung around through the crazy amount of like through the contract talk. Maybe, yeah, I guess it's something that's one of those kind of useful. Yeah, maybe there's a reason. You know, kind of articles are a bit more interesting for these sort of things because you kind of want it as a reference. I'm not sure in live it's going to be that interesting. Oh yeah, Rob. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't say, but I was thinking about maybe starting to stream on Wednesday mornings. I'd like to go. I don't want to clash with Bez, so maybe I'd be at 10 o'clock European time, 9 o'clock UK time, which I understand maybe, obviously, like a lot of the audience that comes to these streams might not be able to make that time, but I was just trying to, you know, see if, you know, there might be other people who can listen, who can't listen now, but could listen then. and also it might allow me to catch the Australian crowd, which it would be nice to like get to know some people over there, some great streamers and things. So that could be fun. And I really like Theo's. He has these kind of like early morning coffee streams, which I quite enjoy. So maybe we might try doing that. But we'll see. Or maybe Theo and I can just have some coffee together each week and chat, and people can listen in. So that'll be cool. Yeah, so we'll see. But maybe I will try Wednesday this week. I will. I now have to think about whether I can do it or not. Shall we raid somebody? I had fun raiding. Anybody got any suggestions for raids? There's Ian Zhang's playing some Terraforming Mars. That's one option. I don't have any of my other followers or like my other followers or subscriptions. It seems to be on, or that I follow. Anyone else have a good suggestion of who they'd want to see? That'd be cool because their stream would be English that day. Yeah, I think we sort of talked about like being on each other streams possibly, but he said that it probably is going to make a lot more sense that he comes on my stream than the other way around, because he suspects his audience is, understandably mostly francophone. So yeah, if I was running a stream, you'd be welcome to Rainby. Yeah, well, what are you doing, Rob? You should be streaming. Have you ever thought about streaming, Rob? I've seen you like on a lot of other people's streams. Is it something you've ever thought of doing? Yeah, Nicola. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah. Okay, well let's head over to Ian. It's always nice to see and support another streamer. But yeah, so we'll go off and rate him. But from me, thanks all for tuning in today. Thanks for watching. Hope it was useful. Leave any comments on Twitter, and I will see you either Wednesday or Friday, hopefully this week. And yeah, have an amazing week until we all meet again. Yeah, cool. Well, thanks very much. Let's raid. Start the raid. Okay, so it's counting down. Hopefully it all works. Thanks, everyone. Take care.